Hello, and welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto, attorney at law in the state of Michigan, where I've been practicing law now for 24 years in the fields of consumer protection and lemon law. I'm a frequent writer for Jalopnik's sub-blog, The Garage, and from time to time I write for Opposite Lock. I get a lot of phone calls in my office involving used cars. Usually people are unhappy because they bought a bad one, and sometimes they mention rebuilt or salvage titles to me. So today we're going to talk about how to avoid buying a salvage vehicle and why you want to avoid buying a salvage vehicle. First of all, you have to understand the idea that when vehicles get wrecked really badly and insurance companies don't want to repair them because it's not economically feasible to do so, they often deem the vehicles a total loss or a salvage, and they get rid of the vehicle and they just pay off the claim. Those vehicles wind up in the stream of commerce somewhere down the road, and sometimes they get parted out and the parts get used to fix other cars, and sometimes people repair those cars and resell them. Now, I understand that some people in the audience are going to say, hey Steve, I bought a salvage vehicle, I bought a rebuilt junk vehicle, whatever it was, and I was happy with it because I got a great deal on it and I know what I'm doing. I'm a sophisticated car buyer, I'm a mechanic or whatever. That's fine. I'm not talking about people who do this willingly and intentionally buy a vehicle like this because they can get a good deal on it and they're aware of what's wrong with it. I'm talking about avoiding the situation where you buy a vehicle like this not knowing what it is, because more often than not that's going to cause problems for you down the road. It's going to cost you money. Okay, so why you want to avoid buying a salvage vehicle? Okay, here's what happens. Vehicle is in an accident. It's a late model vehicle. An insurance company comes out and they look at it and they say it's going to cost more to fix than it's worth. So they deem the vehicle a total loss. The vehicle is now totaled, and they'll often send it to an auction and they'll sell it off as salvage, or they'll sell it to a wrecking yard, or they'll sell it to somebody who does this. And those vehicles are often taken out someplace and they're parted out. So a vehicle was in a really bad rear end accident. The front end of the car is fine. They'll pull the clip off, use it to fix a car. They'll pull the engine and transmission out. They'll resell those and so on. But once in a while, somebody will look at a vehicle and go, you know something? I think the insurance company is wrong. That vehicle can be fixed, okay? So take a snapshot in time at the moment that the vehicle is at that auction, okay? The insurance company has deemed it a total loss, and therefore it will be branded on the title as being junk or salvage or something of that nature, wrecked even. Different states have got different determinations as to what they call it, but that vehicle will have a different title. So if you are one of these people who buys a vehicle at an auction that's wrecked, you'll notice that the title's got this designation on it. They'll call it a brand. The title's been branded, and oftentimes the title's a different color. Some states the title's a different color to put people on notice that this is not a normal vehicle. There's something wrong with this vehicle. Now, if you buy a salvage vehicle, like I said, you can take it and part it out and sell the parts and make money doing it that way. Some people, however, will take the vehicle back and they'll fix it and they'll try to put the vehicle back on the road. Legally, you are allowed to do this, and there's certain steps you can take, and it varies from state to state. In Michigan, for instance, and I wrote an article about this, and I even interviewed a Michigan State Police trooper about this, because in Michigan, to get the vehicle back on the road, you've got to fix it, you've got to replace all the parts that are wrecked on it, and you've got to make the car complete. And when the trooper comes out and looks at the vehicle and confirms that the vehicle can get a rebuilt salvage title, he's not confirming the vehicle is safe to drive, he's not confirming anything about it except that the vehicle is complete and does not include any stolen parts. So if the vehicle had suffered a really bad front-end accident and you've got a brand new clip on the car, one of the things that the trooper is going to be looking at is to make sure that the clip is not stolen from another car. They don't want people running chop shops where they chop up stolen cars, put the pieces of the stolen cars onto formerly wrecked vehicles, and put these Franken vehicles back on the road, okay? So I've met people before who said, you know, I was looking at this car, it looks great, it's got a rebuilt salvage title, but you know, that means the car is safe to drive, right? And I say, no, there's several problems you've got here, but one of which is never think that because the vehicle's got a rebuilt salvage title that the car is safe and complete and is just the same as some other unwrecked vehicle. It's not. That vehicle that's been salvaged or wrecked at one point in its life, I don't care what color the title is today, it's tainted for the rest of its life. So a couple of things to keep in mind is where these cars come from. These cars all come from the fact that at one point in time an insurance company deemed them a total loss. You have to understand that insurance companies would rather not deem vehicles a total loss. I've heard from people who said, vehicles got, what appears to me 95% of the car is destroyed. The insurance company says they can fix it. Well, guess what? You got to let the insurance company do it. But my experience has been that insurance companies are more prone to not declaring it a total loss than they are to declaring the total loss. So if an insurance company says this vehicle's wrecked, you better believe that it is in fact wrecked. Now, once you get the vehicle and it's been rebuilt and it's going to be put back in stream of commerce and it's got a different title to it, the title will be branded one way or the other as like a rebuilt salvage. Now, if you go to buy a car and it looks nice, it's a late model vehicle and some guy's selling it, whether it's at a dealership or an individual, the real question is whether this person discloses to you the proper history of the car. If someone's selling you a car and they simply say, here's a great car, blah, 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 and you're negotiating a price, you don't know the vehicle's been wrecked or not, and you might not know until they pull out the title. Now, I've told people before, and I've mentioned it on this podcast before, that if you are shopping for a car, you're negotiating a price, you're test driving the car, you're slamming the doors, you're kicking the tires, one of the things you always do is say, by the way, show me the title. Ask to see the title before you negotiate a price. I have spoken to people before who said, you know something, I was car shopping, I looked at the car, I test drove it, it ran great, we even shook hands on a price. Guy gives me the keys, he says, oh, by the way, here's the title. He hands over a title and it's got a brand on it, rebuilt salvage. Now at that point, is that car yours? Is it not yours? It's something people want to argue about, okay? So the question simply becomes, what would have happened if you'd found it out earlier? You probably would have negotiated a better price and so on. So always ask to see the title. It'll also help you get out of a curb stoning situation where someone's selling you a car they don't own. You don't want that to happen either. But again, ask to see the title. But the number one thing you can do when you are talking about car shopping and to avoid buying a salvage vehicle is to have the car inspected. Now, a lot of people are going to say, wait a second, Steve, shouldn't the number one thing you do be to check Carfax or AutoCheck or VinCheck Pro or one of these companies that checks the title histories? Absolutely not. That's not the first thing you do. That's the second thing you do. The first thing you do is inspect the car with a trained, properly qualified inspector. So I'll tell you a story about my life when I was in high school. Just got out of high school. I got a job. I was looking to buy a used car. I found a used car I liked. I went and looked at it, test drove it. Everything was great about it. I called up my brother, said, hey, Dave, come on down here. I need you to look at this car for me. My brother Dave at the time did a lot of body work and paint work on cars. And he said, sure, come on down. So Dave comes down, walks around the car, gets halfway around it, and he stops and he goes, did they tell you about the accident? And I said, what accident? And it's like, my brother's got ESP or X-ray vision. I mean, what's he talking about? He walks around the passenger side, he opens the door up, goes, sure enough, there's overspray on the inside of the front fender. And of course, there's also cables going into the door for the electric windows. And somebody had clipped those when they'd removed the door to fix the fender. And they'd fixed the cables very, very well. And I hadn't noticed the splices when I'd opened the door up previously when I inspected the car. But my brother said, he goes, he goes, I walked by and he goes, I noticed that there's a very, very slight difference in the paint job. I spotted it because I do a lot of paint on cars. He goes, but the average person wouldn't notice that. And he goes, and it looks to me like they actually did a pretty good job repairing the car. So there's nothing wrong with the car simply because it's got some body work done to it. It's a question of how much body work's been done to it. So Dave gets down on his back, climbs underneath the car, is looking at the unibody, make sure the car is not bent, make sure that everything underneath the car is the correct height, everything looks good. He gets back up, he goes, looks to me like it's a great buy, price is good. Only thing wrong with this car is the fact that it was in a very minor accident where one fender got repainted. He goes, and they did a decent job of it. He goes, I spotted it, but I'm a professional. So that's the kind of thing that a good inspector will spot. So I tell people when you're going to buy a used car, go out and look at it yourself, but bring someone to inspect it for you. That person can be a mechanic or somebody very, very knowledgeable in the field, but they're going to be looking at the car to see if not only does it run mechanically soundly, but to make sure that it hasn't been wrecked and so on, okay? So they're going to get underneath the car, look at it, they're going to pop the trunk, look underneath the, the trunk carpeting, and they're going to look all over the car, not just to make sure it's complete and intact and runs well, but that it hasn't been in a major, major accident. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, Steve, if the vehicle's been salvaged and so on, won't that always be on the title? And the answer to that, of course, is no, because if it was, it would solve all our problems. And there's a couple reasons why this is. Not all states title vehicles the same way. And I have seen examples where someone got a vehicle that was titled in one state, where in a previous state it had been titled differently. Wisconsin, for instance, has different standards of wreckedness, so they'll actually call a vehicle not total salvage, and I forgot the terminology, but if a vehicle's got 50% damage, for instance, they'll title it differently. And people will buy those cars in Wisconsin, bring them to Michigan, retitle them, and Michigan doesn't pick up that information. It simply gives these vehicles clean titles. So not all this information transfers from state to state. I've also seen people who bought a vehicle with a clean title, they ran a Carfax on it, and Carfax shows that there's some massive accident in the past that should have deemed this vehicle total loss. And why that information didn't follow through the title, no one knows. That's one of the great things about working for the government. The government makes mistakes all the time, and when they get caught making a mistake, they say, oh, well, we don't know how that happened. Don't know how that happened. Well, it's nice that you don't know how it happened, but I'm in a lot of trouble here because I just bought a vehicle that should have had a salvage title and it didn't. Is there some way you can help me? And of course, there's no way they can help you. So not all the stuff gets reported properly. Not all the stuff makes it from state to state. And more importantly, Carfax, AutoCheck, and VinCheck Pro routinely miss stuff. Okay, they'll even tell you that. If you read a Carfax report, it says right on there, this report is not 100% complete. It's not guaranteed to be complete. This report is missing things. And they say that because not all 50 states cooperate with Carfax. And also, if you think about it, a lot of the information isn't coming from the state, okay? So an insurance company deems a vehicle a total loss. It's up to the insurance company to notify Carfax. We just deem that car a total loss, okay? And that might not have gotten reported by the insurance company. There have been other situations of things that have got missed. I wrote an article not too long ago for Jalopnik about how I had vehicles bought back under the Lemon Law for clients of mine, and I have the VIN numbers because I have all the files and paperwork. And just on a lark, I took 5 VIN numbers of bought back vehicles and I ran them through Carfax. And $50 later, I'm here to tell you that Carfax reported several of these as simply having been sold at auction. And it had a disclaimer that said, by the way, many cars are sold at auction, so don't worry about it. So they actually told you not to worry about buying these cars that have these hellacious repair histories that they cannot be repaired, and they're junk. One of these cars, if you'd offered to give it to me and said, Steve, I'm giving you this car, but you know the caveat is you've got to make this your daily driver, I would have said, sorry, I'll walk instead. Okay? And I'm talking about a very, very expensive sports car. Okay, the average type of car that, a car that the average person would have loved to drive on a daily basis, no, I wouldn't want that car because it was that undependable. And Carfax came back and said, yes, it was sold at auction, but don't worry about it. Auctions happen all the time. Well, that's not true. So Carfax, VinCheck Pro, and AutoCheck routinely miss stuff. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. In many states, Michigan included, you can contact the Secretary of State's office at the Capitol and say, hey, I want to get a title history on a car. And if you've got the VIN number to a car, you can contact Lansing and do what's called a title lookup. And they'll send you a complete title history of the car. And I'm talking about actual Xerox copies of the fronts and backs of all the titles and title applications that Michigan has got. So let's suppose in a perfect situation the car was sold in Detroit and transferred title 2-3 times within the state of Michigan. You can get the documents from every single one of those transfers from Lansing. It'll cost you a couple bucks a page, but it's doable. And I've done that before for litigation. I've also done it on cars I've owned. And it's fascinating because that type of stuff is information that Carfax summarizes but doesn't give you the full picture on. Okay? So when you're going to shop for a car, you're looking at a late model car, it looks nice, drives nice, you kick the tires for whatever reason people kick tires for. Before you commit to buying it, ask to see the title, but also have the vehicle inspected by somebody who knows what they're looking for. Remember that vehicles can get totaled for a bunch of different reasons. Obviously, if I take a car out and run it into a brick wall at 90 miles an hour and bend it in half, if the vehicle gets totaled, you know, okay, this thing was in a front-end collision. But Hurricane Sandy hits the Northeast and thousands of cars are up to their necks in water. These vehicles are totaled, but they don't necessarily show body damage. And as you can imagine, many of those Hurricane Sandy survivor cars were taken to the Midwest, washed, waxed, dried out. They had the carp removed from the trunk, and they were put on lots and sold. Now, many of them had salvage titles because insurance companies had cashed in on that and written these things all off as a loss. But a lot of people would then take those cars to whatever state's easiest to get them retitled in, and they'd get them retitled. So now you're looking at a vehicle, and the guy says, hey, it's great, low mileage, blah, blah, blah. And he says, oh, by the way, it's got this rebuilt salvage title, but don't worry. As you can tell, nothing's wrong with it. And by the way, here's the deal. The guy might lie to you about what the salvage title was there for. He might say, oh, the vehicle was actually involved in a hail damage situation, and we fixed all the hail damage. I mean, how do you know what the problem is with the vehicle? So you've got to see if you can find out what the problem was. If you're buying the car from the guy who actually did the repairs, it's very easy. If that person is honest, they'll show you photographs of the car from before it was wrecked. They'll show you documents showing what they did to repair the car. They'll show you their receipts because they had to have that stuff to get the car certified rebuilt salvage. They won't show you that stuff because they don't want you to know how bad it really was. And of course, if they didn't do the work, they might not have that information. Now, people ask me, they say, Steve, I bought a car, it runs okay. Now, it turns out it's got a salvage title, but it runs okay. Have I really been ripped off? And, you might not have been if you got a really, really good buy on that, really good price. But there's a couple things to remember. And one is, if you've got a vehicle that's rebuilt salvage, a lot of insurance companies don't want to insure that car. Or if they do, they want to insure it for a lesser extent. Because if a vehicle has rebuilt salvage on the title, it's an indication that the vehicle's already been through hell and back one time. So if you take that vehicle now and smash it and then want the insurance company to have it repaired, they're going to say it's harder to repair a car that's already been repaired once. And that's apparently true, okay? So you're going to have a hard time getting insurance in the car. Also, your insurance rates might be higher because the insurance company is going to look at the car and go, well, wait a second. The car was totaled, then rebuilt, and now it's put back on the road. And even though the state signed off on the car and said, yeah, the car can be titled again, keep in mind the state's not certifying the car as roadworthy or safe. They're simply certifying the vehicle's been rebuilt properly. And by properly, it means no stolen parts and it's complete. So an insurance company might say, we're going to charge you a higher premium and give you lesser coverage for this. But underlying all of this, the number one thing you need to remember about a rebuilt salvage car that you buy is that when you go to sell it, you're going to get hit also. So if you get a really good price going in, you might be able to get out of it and get your money back. But if you bought the car unknowingly, for whatever reason, and you have this car, it's got a rebuilt salvage history unbeknownst to you, now you're stuck with it. When you go to sell it, the person you're selling it to, you have to disclose to them what you know about the car, right? If you're going to be honest, you say it's got a rebuilt salvage title, they're going to want to pay you less money for it than if that hadn't been the case. So that's the real problem, is the insurance and the resale. So again, if you're a sophisticated buyer and you're out shopping and you encounter a rebuilt salvage vehicle and you actually figure out what was wrong with it and you determine that the car is safe to drive and all that, yeah, you can buy it and get a decent deal on it. But remember, you're still going to have issues with the insurance coverage, what your premiums are going to be, and the resale value. But again, if you're simply just a person out car shopping and you're thinking about buying a car, have the car inspected, but make sure your inspector not only looks at it for mechanical things, but also for a potential rebuild in its past. If your inspector says neither of those things are in the case, that is, the car is perfectly sound mechanically and it's got no major accidents in its past, then ask to see the title. The title's clean, buy that car. But you do, most of the time, want to avoid buying a salvage vehicle. Questions or comments? Contact me on my website, LehtosLaw.com, LehtosLaw.com. I'm on Twitter at Steve Lehto, at STEVELEHTO. And of course, this show is on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. You can watch it and listen to it. And I thank you for doing so. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.